Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. In today's episode, we're going to be continuing on with our progress of the Damascus pizza cutter, the world's fanciest pizza cutter. Before we jump in, let's thank today's sponsor.
Today's episode is sponsored by Audible, which has the largest selection of audiobooks anywhere, and you can get started with a 1-month free trial, which includes a free audiobook for you to listen to, as well as unlimited Audible originals by going to audible.com/forge or by texting FORGE to 500-500. Let's jump into the video.
So in the last episode, what we had going on is we built ourselves what we're calling the Isaiah. Its namesake is our lovely videographer here. He does a great job. And so what we need to move on to now is doing some work on the guard. Now, the tang and the blade are obviously not finished, but I want to get these things roughed out before I start finishing everything up. The piece of bronze that I was hoping to use, unfortunately, just isn't big enough. So we're gonna have to run to the recycled material supply to pick up some new chunks of bronze that we'll hopefully be able to flatten down and work ourselves a nice guard out of. So, we got a couple pieces that might work. They didn't have exactly what I was looking for. I think this might be our best bet. When we flatten it down, it'll be thicker than we need, and we should be able to bend the swoop that we need into it. The bronze that I had just isn't really bendable, and hopefully this stuff will do a little bit better. If that doesn't work, I did get this fat chunk that will also have enough room for it, but it'll be a lot of stock removal, so we're gonna try this one first. So, I got a little mixed up there. I'm actually gonna hop back into working on this Isaiah. I've just got to get the whole tang situation sorted out so we can get a good fit up on the first try without having to go back and mess around with this at all. So first thing I'm gonna do is gonna bend this tang right here. Right now, it just comes off at an awkward angle, so we're gonna bend it there. And then what we're gonna do is taper that whole thing. We're gonna make it thinner over here than it is up here. Alec, we're trying to film. So now that we've got that tang bent to the right shape, we're gonna go ahead and get this thing hardened up. After we do that, we'll be able to get a nice surface finish on here, and we'll be ready to etch it and then fit up the guard. The other thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna harden this blade right now as well. So I'm gonna throw it in a pair of tongs, throw it in the kiln, let it come up to temperature, and then quench it just like we're gonna do the tang. No, the Isaiah, sorry. So while those are tempering, we're gonna go ahead and make up the buttons that are gonna go on either side, the screws that's gonna hold the whole spinny part of the blade together. All right, I've got this designed. I'm gonna go ahead and take the same bit of steel that I used to forge the Isaiah, and I'm gonna forge it into a round bar that we'll then chuck up in the lathe to make our screw button holding assembly thing together out of. Why do they call it a tap? They should call it a snap, am I right? Well, we'll go ahead and cut this off and see if we can get that thing out of there. So I think we figured out that Damascus was just a lot hard, and so we've thrown that hunk here into the Paragon KM18T Pro double barrel kiln, which will be available soon through the Alec Steele Co. And we're gonna run an annealing cycle on it. This will run for a couple hours and it'll get nice and soft, make it really nice to machine when we get into the shop tomorrow. All right, it's the next morning now. We've got the pieces out of the oven. These are hardened and tempered. They're looking really nice, and we've got our round stock that is fully annealed. It'll be really nice to machine. We're gonna go ahead and head into the grinding room and get these things all cleaned up and ready for etch. So now that I've got the bevel rough ground on one side, came over to the Alec Steele Co. warehouse to grab some 60, 120 grit and Trizac belts to do a hollow grind on this thing on the 2x48 belt grinder. So all of these belts are available on the Alec Steele Co. website, and they'll set you up really well for success, and then it'll cut down on the amount of hand sanding time that you'll have to do significantly. So what I'm gonna do is a hollow grind on this blade. Traditionally, we generally do a lot of flat grinds and convex grinds, which a flat grind is obviously where the bevel is flat. A convex grind is where the bevel is convex. And a hollow grind is the opposite of a convex grind. It's actually a concave grind like this. And you do that by using a contact wheel. And the reason that I'm choosing this grind for the pizza cutter is because it's not going to be a super aggressively hard used sort of blade. I want something that's going to have as thin an edge as possible. So the less material back here, the easier it's going to slice. Well, we've got our blade all hand sanded up. It's looking super, super nice. We're at 400 grit. We might take it to 600 before etch. I'll decide that later on. For now, it's time to move on to working on the Isaiah. I'm gonna take a little bit more material off of the top here, and that's because that button that we have turned down from the round stock almost fits perfectly, but it's a little bit proud up top here, so I'll shave that down and then get this ready to hand sand. It spins, and that is amazing considering the fact that I made it, generally the things that I make don't want to move. This one moves, and it moves well. What we're gonna do now is make a way to hold these little buttons that are on either side so we can dome them. It'll just kind of smooth it out, make it so it's not a really chunky eye catch, but something that your eye flows over well and just fits in well with the rest of the piece. Go ahead and quickly do a test etch on these so I can figure out in which direction do I want that pattern to be going before I affix it to the Isaiah. So we have an interesting point here, and that is that these are two pieces of the exact same steel. These came out of the same bar, they're the same. However, this one etched a lot darker than this one when we put it in the ferric chloride. That's because this piece is hardened and this one isn't. And the interesting thing is that ferric chloride darkens the steel a whole lot more after it's been hardened. Unfortunately for you guys, we now sell bottles of ferric chloride at a pretty dang good price on AlecSteelShop.com. If you're making Damascus, if you're etching Damascus, go check it out. So our next step here is going to be making an indexing pin that's going to make it so that this pattern lines up well with the other pattern in the spot that we've indicated. I'm just gonna use a small bronze pin that just makes it so that it won't turn. So we just got some exciting news. We're gonna interrupt. We just had this delivered. We've been waiting on this for a freakishly long time, about 6 months or so. This is 1,000 pounds of 1080 high carbon steel, which is the dark steel that we use in our Damascus. We have both 5.6 by 1.5" by 1/8 inch steel and 7.7 by 2 inch by 1/8 1080 as well. We've got 400 pounds of the shorter stuff and 600 pounds of the bigger stuff. This is what we're going to be using in our Damascus from now on, just so we can build those bigger billets faster for those large pattern welded projects. Both sizes are going to be available through the AlecSteelShop.com, which is super, super exciting. So make sure to go check that out. With that, we're going to head back and get those buttons tempered up and get that guard all the way fit up. Well, we're gonna call it there for today's episode. We got everything all fit up, ready to start etching stuff. Before we move on to doing the actual fitting of the handle and getting this thing completely finished out, I'm absolutely stoked with how this is looking. I'm really glad I decided to round those buttons because they just came out looking really, really nice. It really flows well with the rest of the design, so I think that was a good choice. Thank you guys for following along, and before we end it, let's thank today's sponsor.
Today's episode has been sponsored by Audible. Just because you might not be going to school in the normal fashion this year doesn't mean you have to stop learning. In fact, while you commute, while you work, if it's safe to do so, maybe while you ride your bike, you can listen to information and absorb it through those incredible audiobooks that you can get at Audible. You can listen to books about marketing, about sales, about self-help, all that good stuff, or you can buckle down to a just jolly good autobiography. Growing up, I used to love watching Top Gear, and I've recently been watching some clips of it on YouTube, and it's made me want to learn a little bit more. So I went on Audible and I got myself Richard Hammond's autobiography. With an Audible membership, you get a new credit every month, which is good for one audiobook. You can buy more credits to get more audiobooks, or just buy the audiobooks outright. It ends up being incredibly inexpensive, and I highly recommend it, because once you have the credits, it's super easy to download a new audiobook in your app and start listening. So folks, get started now by going to audible.com/forge, or by texting FORGE to 500-500, because you're going to be getting a free trial. And that free trial is going to include one free audiobook and unlimited Audible originals. So check them out. Thank you, Audible, for sponsoring this. Thank you guys for watching. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.